we also had a decision we didn't expect out at all, the real estate business, and those kind of things can change values, and courts can change values. And it's a lot easier to make those decisions when you just own marketable securities than when you own businesses. And I've made plenty of those decisions as I've watched what have happened in various industries and companies in over 70 years. But Greg made the decision, which was fine with us, to get out. Well, and he had no knowledge of what was going to be happening in either the real estate field or the utility field. And we're not in the mood to sell any business of it. But Berkshire Hathaway Energy is worth considerably less money than it was 2 years ago based on societal factors. And that happens in some of our businesses. It certainly happened in our textile business, and it's happened. The public utility business is not as good a business as it was a couple of years ago. And if anybody doesn't believe that, they can look at Hawaiian Electric, and they can look at the Edison in the current wildfires situation in California, and there's societal trends that are. I just got a note here on my monitor says the books are now sold out, so you'll have to spend your money on other things. Here's fudge. This is what I'm eating, so yeah. But that's the explanation. The values change, and they don't always change upward. And when we made the deal with Greg, we would happy to buy out the Scott family at that price. And when we made a deal with the Scott company, we wouldn't have been happy to pay Greg the price that he received. But that's like Berkshire shares. We bought in stock at X, and we buy in stock at less than X if conditions change poor, and we pay over the years. We pay more and more because it builds in value, but it doesn't do it in a straight line. And I would say that our enthusiasm for buying public utility companies is different now than it would have been a couple years ago. That happens in other industries too, but it's pretty dramatic in public utilities, and it's particularly dramatic in public utilities because they are going to need lots of money. So if you're going to need lots of money, you probably ought to behave in a way that encourages people to give you lots of money, and we will see where we go. But we'd like to see public utilities do well, but our responsibility is to the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, station one again.
Dear Warren, dear Greg, dear fellow owners, it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Brevi Panida. I was born in communist Albania, but I'm now teaching economics in London, England. The wonderful writing of Warren and Charlie has significantly shaped my thinking and teaching. I thank you both very much for the many insights over the years. Warren has often written about the importance of Berkshire's earning power to owners. My question is, what was, in your estimate, Berkshire's earning power in the latest fiscal year? It would be great if you can comment on any significant items that either increased or decreased the earning power as compared to reported net income measures for Berkshire. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think our underlying earning power was affected negatively here a while back by what happened in the utility field. I think that our earning power was not enlarged by any large acquisitions that come along, but they come along periodically. So we will see something at some point that could be, on the one that was $10 billion, we would have added to earning power. I mean, why else would we do it? So that's very situational. And of course, it depends so much on what the general market is doing and what interest rates are doing and what psychology is doing. We will make our best deals when people are the most pessimistic. You know, that's been true ever since I was 1930. I was born in 1930. When I was born, things got much more attractive over the next 2 years, and apparently I didn't do anything about it there. But, you know, that was the opportunity of a lifetime, and I blew it by, you know, worrying about the kid in the next crib or something. But over my lifetime, you know, I've had fabulous opportunities sometimes, and they happen because humans are human. And I don't, you know, I'm fearful of all kinds of things. I don't want to try and, you know, be one of the Wallendas and walk on a tiny strip between a couple of twin towers or something, or whatever it may be. But I don't get, I don't get fearful by things that other people are afraid of in a financial way. That you know, the idea that if Berkshire went, let's say Berkshire went down 50% next week, I would regard that as a fantastic opportunity, and it wouldn't bother me in the least. And most people aren't. They just react differently, and so it's not that I don't have emotions, but I don't have emotions about the prices of stocks. I mean, I actually those decisions get all the way to my brain, whereas emotions can get bogged down some other place. So Berkshire will increase its earning power over time as we retain money. I mean, we are doing things, making decisions every day. People are working or retaining earnings. We will build the earning power, but it won't be coming in any even stream, and it certainly won't be matched dollar for dollar on either the upside or the downside in market prices. But that's what makes it a good business. And, you know, the investment business is that everything isn't properly appraised, and the sillier other people get, the better your opportunities get. Okay, Becky?
This question comes from Achit Patel, and it's about the big cap technology stocks. In the 2017 annual meeting, you said, Warren, you really don't need any money to run these companies, and referred to them as ideal businesses, referring to the big tech companies, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Amazon. With all of those companies now announcing massive capital investment endeavors and around AI ambitions, have you rethought the above comment, just in terms of them being asset light and what you think of them as a result?
Well, it's always better to make a lot of money without putting up anything than it is to make a lot of money by putting up a lot of money. And so a business that takes no capital to speak of, Coca-Cola, the finished product, which has gone through bottling companies and everything, that takes a lot of capital. But in terms of selling the syrup or the concentrate that goes to it, it doesn't take a lot of capital. So one is a fabulous business, and one is you know, it depends where it is and everything like that. Coca-Cola is popular every place. But some places, I mean, if you're in the bottling business, it costs real money. You have real trucks out there, and you have all kinds of machinery, and you have capital expenditures coming up. And, you know, we've got businesses that take very little capital, that make really high returns on capital. And the ones the politicians talk about as making high returns actually aren't making high returns usually in terms of capital. Insurance, property casualty insurance is kind of a rare business because you need capital as a guarantee fund that you will keep your promises, but you can use it to buy other low intensive capital business. I mean, you can buy you can buy Apple, and that would support that business. So that can be a pretty good business, and it's one of the reasons we've done well over time. But it'll be interesting to see how much capital intensity. There's more capital intensity going on with the Magnificent Seven than there was a few years ago. I mean, basically, Apple has not really needed any capital over the years, and it's repurchased shares that a dramatic amount of reduction. Whether that world is the same in the future or not is something. Hollywood's answer was always to get their money from other people to put up the capital. A lot of people have gotten very rich in the country by essentially figuring out how to get others to put up the capital. And that's what people do in the money management business, and they get very, very rich because they get an override on other people's capital. And incidentally, if all of you were paying 1% for investment management fees at Berkshire last year, you would have paid $8 billion for managing, and you really wouldn't have had to do it. But, investment management is a very good game because other people put up the capital and you charge them for the capital, whether they do well or not, and then you charge them a lot more if they do well. I mean, it's a well-designed business for the people who practice it, and who can blame them? I mean, that is capitalism. But and I saw that in operation when I was working at Solomon, but I didn't need to see it. I knew what existed anyway. The trick in life is to get somebody else's capital and get an override on it. Charlie and I decided it wasn't too elegant a business after a while, but we were not criticizing the efficacy of it. It just didn't appeal to us after a while. I did it for 12 years, though, or something like that. Not really. The one difference that Charlie and I did from other people is we put all our own money in into it. So we did share the losses with our own capital, but we got an override on other people's capital. And that's been, people have made advances where they get the override on other people's capital without putting up any of their own capital to speak of, and that's a very good business, but it can lead to a lot of abuse. Greg, you've watched capital management in the United States, and would you say that Canada is behind or ahead in this respect?
Well, I think when it comes to their capital system, Warren, it is very comparable. There's no question. Other than as we know, I mean, I think the U.S., as far as having a capitalist system, it would be tough to be touched by any country. And I think when I think of Canada, there's just certain responsibilities or obligations that the government wants to take on and aren't going to leave with the public sector. And that's just a decision that's made by society or by the Canadian people, or if you look at another country, Australia, or wherever it may be. But so it's different. But when I think of capitalism, that drive is there, and the desire to allocate capital properly, it's very similar.
It's produced wonders in the United States, if you think about it. But originally, with the Rockefellers and Kennedy and Carnegie's and all that, they actually put up money to build steel mill, or whatever it may have been, with Rockefeller refineries and pipelines and all that sort of thing. They put up money to do it. Now, the trick is to use other people's money, basically, and you know, you can't blame human beings for behaving like humans, but you should be aware of what their motivations are. Capitalism in the United States has succeeded like nothing you've ever seen, but what it is a combination of this magnificent cathedral, which has produced an economy like nothing the world's ever seen, and then it's got this massive casino attached. So you've got the cathedral and the casino, and in the casino, everybody's having a good time, and there's lots of money changing hands and everything, but the cathedral is what, you got to make sure the cathedral gets fed too, because the temptation, and the temptation's very high now, is to go over to the casino where people say, you know, we've got magic boxes and all kinds of things that'll do wonderful things for you, and that's where people are happiest. That's where you get the most promised to you. That's where the most money is for the people that are pushing things. And you know, the balance between the casino and the cathedral it's very important that the United States in the next 100 years make sure that the cathedral is not overtaken by the casino, because people really like to go to casinos. And it's just so much more fun, and they ring bells, and when you win, and you know, they bring you drinks and everything else, and it's designed to move money from one pocket to another. But and in the cathedral, they basically are designing things that will be producing goods and services for 300 and some million people, like it's never been done before in history. It's an interesting system we developed, but it's worked. It dispenses rewards in what seems like a terribly capricious manner. I mean, the idea that people get what they deserve in life, and it's hard to make that argument. But if you argue with it, any other system where it seems to work better, the answer is we haven't found one. So I'll leave it to the next generation to send me the answer, and by Ouija board or whatever works. Okay, station 2.
Hi, my name is Patrick Nestor. I am 13 years old and from Tampa, Florida. I'm here with my brother John, who's 15, and my dad. Thank you for hosting this meeting. This is my first ever shareholder meeting. My question is what high school class or activity helped influence you to who you are today as the greatest investor of all time?
Well, that's a good question. The teachers you get in your life have this incredible impression on you, and a lot of it are the formal teachers you have, but some are informal teachers too. I mean, I learned from certain employers, you know, so much. You really hope you're learning from everybody you find who's well-intentioned and has had a lot of experience, and I had a lot of good luck in that. But I would say that where I was really lucky was my dad was in the investment business. So I would go down on Saturday and I'd wait for him to go to lunch with, and I'd read the books that were around there that nobody else ever read. And they talked to me, numbers talked to me. I could never get my fill of them, and then I discovered the public library, and I read every book there was on investments, literally, in the Omaha Public Library at 19th and Harney. And, you know, I enjoyed learning about that. Unlike Charlie, if Charlie was reading about electricity, he would want to have known everything that Thomas Edison knew and more, and that go through the same thought processes and understand how everything worked. I didn't care how it worked. I just cared whether it worked. And that's a limitation. I'm confessing here. I'm not bragging. But as Charlie would say, I mean, people would always say if you could only have lunch with one person living or dead, who would it be? And Charlie said, I've already had lunch with all of them because I've read all their books, basically. And he really did it. I think having curiosity and actually finding sympathetic teachers is very useful. I ran into a couple of teachers that both in high school and college. In fact, I would say that I went to three different universities, and I went to high school in Washington, and at each place, I found about 2 or 3 really outstanding people, and I just spent my time with them and didn't pay much attention to the other classes. And I was lucky to find something that really fit me very early on. If my ambition had been to become a ventriloquist or whatever the hell it might have been, and it wouldn't have worked. I'd have spent hours and hours and hours, and I wouldn't have been any good when I got through. So I don't believe that. I think there was that book that talked about spending 10,000 hours at something. I could spend 10,000 hours at tap dancing, and you'd throw up if you watched me, But if I spent 10 hours reading Ben Graham, I would be damn smart when I got through. So minds are really, really different. I watch great bridge players, and I watch great physicians. People really, really, really have different talents, and I don't know. I think you're supposed to have 88 billion cells in your brain. I'm not sure that all of mine are flashing bright lights, but you are different than anybody else. That's what my dad always used to tell me, that essentially that, you're something different. It may not be good as a poet, but you find your own path, and you will find the people in schooling that want to talk to you. People that teach in general, they love having a young student who's actually really interested in the subject, and they'll spend extra time with you. They'll do all kinds of things and I ran into that. I had Graham and Dodd at Columbia. Well, Dave Dodd treated me like a son, basically, and but I was interested I was interested in what they were saying, and they found it kind of entertaining that I was so interested in. So I would just, I would look around at what really fascinates you. I wouldn't try and be somebody else. And then I would, you'll find the teachers at a school, and you'll find some outstanding people that are teachers. I've had at least 10 people that have had huge impacts on my life, and every one of them was positive, because I got to select, in a sense, and a number of people really like helping younger people. I found that in school, and probably helps to look a little bit lost and all that, like you need help. But I would say my school experiences were good, but were really very good. But I attribute it much more to the individual than to the institutions. Okay. I've already told you more than I know, so we'll go on to Becky, you're next.
This question comes from Scott Williams in Portland, Oregon. He said, do you think the net benefit of DOGE will be positive or negative for the long-term health of the United States?
Well, why don't you give me a hard one? I think that bureaucracy is something that is amazingly prevalent and contagious even in our capitalist system, and that big corporations, overwhelmingly, most of them look like they could be run better. I'm sure Berkshire does in many respects, and and government is the ultimate. So it really doesn't have any checks on it, and that's why it scares you to some extent about what the future of the currency will be, because they can print currency, and if you have people that get elected by promising people things, and that doesn't mean that they aren't sincere about all kinds of items, but there's no politician that says to anybody that, at least if they have money, that, I really think you have bad breath, and if you don't mind, would you step over away from me? It just doesn't happen. And so I think the problem of how you control revenue and expenses in government is the one that is never fully solved, and has really hurt dramatically many civilizations, and I don't think we're immune from it, and we've come close to it. But if you tell me how in democracy you go in and really change things, we're operating at a fiscal deficit now that is unsustainable over a very long period of time. We don't know whether that means 2 years or 20 years, because there's never been a country like the United States. But you know that if something can't go on forever, it will end, to quote Herbert Stein, a famous economist. And we are doing something that is unsustainable, and it has the aspect to it that it gets uncontrollable to a certain point. I mean, essentially, you just give up on it. And Paul Volcker, kept that from happening in the United States. But we came close. We've come close multiple times, and we've still had very substantial inflation in the United States, but it's never been runaway yet. And that's not something you want to try and experiment with, because it feeds on itself. So I wouldn't want the job of trying to correct what's going on in revenue and expenditures of the United States with roughly a 7% gap, when probably a 3% gap is sustainable. And then the further away you get from that, the more you get to where the uncontrollable begins. And I think that it's a job I don't want, but it's a job I think should be done. And Congress does not seem good at doing it. Well, it sounds like you should quit while I'm ahead. Well, we've got a lot of problems always as a country, but this is one we bring on ourselves. I mean, we have a revenue stream, a capital producing stream, a brains-producing machine like the world has never seen. And if you picked a way to screw it up, it would involve the currency. And that's happened a lot of places. And the incentives plus the checks, well, there aren't any real checks. In theory, you would make it so there was substantial downside for anybody that screwed things up, but there isn't downside, there's upside. So it's the problem of the most successful company in the history of the country in the history of the world. And at this point, we got a little room to go in solving them. With that, I'll shut up and go on to station 3.
Hello, Mr. Buffett. My name is Saskia from Gifhorn, Germany. And first of all, I want to thank you because you made such a great impact in my life and the people I love. And that's priceless.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Buffett, imagine it's 1776 and you're sitting alongside Benjamin Franklin, helping to shape the foundation of a new nation. What core economic principles would you advocate for building a fair, resilient, and opportunity-driven capitalism society? One that supports long-term prosperity for future generations?
Well, I probably, that's a good question, but I would probably say to Ben Franklin, you just keep thinking and don't talk to me because you'll come up with some better ideas than I will. He was incredibly remarkable person. I mean, he would say he's almost probably the last person to almost have a grasp of every aspect of activity in the country. He invented all kinds of things, and he incidentally, we were talking about power of compound interest and that sort of thing. He left a will that left a sum of money to Philadelphia and another sum to Boston that would serve as an example for a couple hundred years, of the power of compounding and all kinds of things. He was so far ahead of his time that the best thing I could do if I was under that tree with him was be to get out of his way and let him just keep thinking. He saw the problems that success could bring to a society, as well as other problems. I mean, more immediate problems that in all kinds of fields. But the problems of how to take 8 billion people, because there's no way we can separate ourselves from the rest of the world. We can be an example to the rest of the world, and I think it behooves us, since we have had all this good fortune in this country, and we do have a pretty good system. I don't think you get very far by lecturing the world on how you are the one that should tell them what they should do with their lives. I think you get a certain amount of resentment when just a few hundred years ago, a whole different group of countries were running the world, and now you start giving them advice, and I think it's a real mistake in communication or in persuasion to lecture a bunch of people or you've just won the game. I mean, but anyway, I would say that I would advise Ben to figure out how to win the game and keep a certain amount of humility at the same time. And I would tell them to try and design a system that doesn't invent too many things that can destroy the planet, that become uncontrollable once you get them out there. There was no alternative to us developing the atom bomb, but the expansion of the number of people that have the ability from 1 to 8 and 9 probably pretty soon with Iran. I mean, that's a mistake that society just could not afford to make. I mean, solving the problem with 9 variables instead of simply 1. Now, it's totally understandable. My dad was in Congress when the atom bomb was first used. It's amazing how Sam Rayburn kept the House of Representatives uninformed, because they're supposed to appropriate all the money, and he had 435 congressmen there, and they had no idea they were appropriating money for Los Alamos, or what was going on in Chicago, or what was going on at Tennessee. But anyway, we do have a society that is far beyond anything that Ben Franklin dreamt of. It's achieved some of it's moving toward, in the right direction, toward solving some problems where we made kind of broad declarations about all men being created equal and et cetera. And then we did some of the things we did. But generally speaking, we moved in the right direction. But we face problems that I don't know how Ben Franklin would attack the problem of what you do once you get weapons of mass destruction in many hands, and when you essentially look at the world as something where there are winners and losers, and that the winners are, humiliate the losers and do all kinds of things. But I'll let the people that are a lot younger here figure out the answers on that. But it's still the most wonderful. There's never been anything you could dream like what has happened in the United States. So it's the best place and the best time to be alive by miles in history. Just think of a couple hundred years ago and somebody, yanking out a few of your teeth and pouring whiskey down you and doing, and the subsistence and particularly in this Midwest. Just imagine waiting till the Missouri froze over every year just to see whether you could get your wagon across and maybe have a pregnant woman in the back. It's just amazing what has happened of a positive nature during my lifetime. And then the question is how do you keep it and how do you improve it? And I do think that fundamental to all of it, though, is having a currency that does not get debased. What that does to the stability of a society where all the people that trust their government get screwed, and all the people that figure out ways to profit off of it become rich or richer. I don't think you want a society that operates in that manner. So anyway, let's see, that was section 3. So we're going to Becky, is that right? Yep.
That's right. Greg, this question's for you. It comes from a shareholder named Jay Milroy, who writes, Mr. Buffett has a hands-off approach to managing the operating subsidiaries. How would you describe your approach?
Better.
Well, we've got our managers over there, and I would say going back to 2018, it's been very fortunate to be in this role because one, I had to learn a lot of the businesses, and there's no question as Warren bought the businesses, had that general knowledge. I absolutely had to engage with each of them, and they've been great in sharing their business models, their approach, their thoughts around where the risks and opportunities are. And I think as we went through that, there's no question I had questions and wanted to engage with them. And Warren talks about the curiosity being important as you go through things. That would be my style, to have questions and comments around their business, their frameworks. At the same time, they have great businesses and they run them very autonomously, and that remains in place. But if there's opportunities to see where maybe you've seen something in another business or an opportunity I may see in their industry, we're going to discuss it and see if that's something we should pursue, or are we properly addressing the risk. And I found all our managers to be absolutely engaging on that and want to have those dialogues. And I'd say that's a reflection of my approach. I'd also say that when you think of our managers, again, very autonomous. They run their businesses. They know it better than I ever will. But if I see an opportunity that it's well worth their time to talk to another one of our managers, if it's Geico and they've gone through a technology transformation, they're not by themselves that need to be thinking that way. We want to make sure the right folks are talking and figuring out how we can benefit from the prior experiences. So it's, I would say, more active, but hopefully in a very positive way. And we got an exceptional group, so it's worked out exceptionally well as I've gone through that period of time.
It's working way better with Greg than with me because, I just, I didn't want to work as hard as he works, and I could get away with it because we've got a basically good business, very good business, and I wasn't in danger of you firing me by virtue of ownership and the fact that we would do pretty well. But the fact that you can do pretty well doesn't mean you couldn't do better, and Greg can do better at many things. Many people want to be managed, need help in being managed. Some don't. Some you just leave alone. We've had managers that would have been crazy to start giving instructions to because they just quit. And I wouldn't blame them because I'd be the same type myself. But a lot of people, people really do welcome direction and help, and particularly when they're getting it from somebody like Greg that really lives the life himself and doesn't just come down from high and say, here's what you do while I do something else. And a manager that behaves differently than what he's asking the people beneath them to behave, it just doesn't work over time. And people want a manager that they admire, and they're not going to admire him if those people profess to behave in one manner and behave in another manner. It's easier, this is a sad thing, but it's easier for an organization to see its quality move downward than it is upward. If the boss behaves badly, it causes everybody to behave. That is really catching. It's not as catching on the way in upper management, but if the manager is doing a lot of little things to grease his own situation, pretty soon, let's say you're running a retail establishment, pretty soon all the employees, or a lot of the employees, are telling their friends that they get a discount, you know, at the retail operation, and if their friend wants something, they'll put it on their account and then or get the discount. Once you start deviating downward, it is really contagious and it is hard to rebuild. So you really need someone that behaves well on top and is not playing games for their own benefit. And we get a lot of managers that bend over backwards not to do that sort of thing. And then we get a few that bend over forwards. And if you get enough companies, you're going to get a lot of different forms of behavior. And Greg does something about it. And I've generally been lax in doing something about it, but he's done a way better job at that than I have. Okay. Station 4.
Hello, Mr. Buffett and Mr. Abel. My name is Kansas Lohmeyer. I am a junior at Elkhorn South High School and was born and raised in Omaha. My question is directed to Greg Abel. Berkshire Hathaway is the second largest utility provider in the United States, and a 2025 Reuters investigation found that the coal fleet is the dirtiest in the nation. There is currently no concrete plans to retire coal and fully transition to renewable energy. I'm 17 years old. Considering that, what do you have to say to young people like me who will live with the consequences of climate change caused by companies like Berkshire?
Thank you for your both your question and your comments, because it is important to understand, say, Berkshire Hathaway Energy, but also how they operate, and maybe using Iowa at least as a starting example, because I think that was one of the states cited in the report. One of the important things that I'd say early in us acquiring our energy companies, and I go back to when we acquired Mid-American, we acquired it in 1999. Berkshire purchased Mid-American in 2000. But one thing that became very clear to myself and our teams was that what we do within our utilities is really driven in two fronts. One, we absolutely have to meet the requirements and the law that's laid out federally. But most importantly, we had to recognize we implement public policy across these states. And that was an interesting conversation when I go back to Iowa. And again, the report cited that as a significant problem. It was early in the 2000s when, for the first time in Iowa, we were going to, as a utility, be short power. So we didn't have the energy, and we entered into a significant discussion with our governor at the time, and really sat down and said, where do you want us to go as Mid-American? And what resources do you want as a state? And at that time, we were predominantly a coal-based state. And we recognize that. Obviously, and fundamentally, personally viewed it as a risk, but we needed to have that conversation with our state and as to how we would manage that going forward. The interesting thing was that as we had that conversation in the early 2000s, again, with the leadership of our state, it was clearly decided we wanted to continue to be long power, so i.e. not be short for our customers. We discussed the type of resource, and I remember a very clear conversation around we wanted to stay balanced across a variety of energy sources. And at that time, it was really coal and natural gas. And at that time, we made the decision to build the largest wind project in the U.S. in Iowa. So we undertook an effort to build 3 resources: a coal plant, a gas plant, and what was the first wind project we owned in Mid-American. And again, it was very consistent with what the state wanted, but we also laid some important groundwork there because we started to define the importance of renewable energy, non-carbon resources, but it has to be consistent with what the state wanted. And we've gone on since that period of time to deploy $16 billion into Iowa associated with renewable energy. Again, very consistent with what our state wanted us to do, i.e. the underlying policy. We don't get to make that decision and just spend $16 billion. It's done in conjunction with our governors, our legislatures, our regulators. And at the same time, we've had the opportunity to retire 5 of the 10 coal units. Now, as the report highlighted, I understand people would like those other 5 coal units retired at this time. But to think we deployed $16 billion to retire 5, and it's a very good outcome for our customers. We've been able to maintain our rates. They're some of the lowest in the country. So it's been done very efficiently. But the reality is we still need those 5 coal units to keep the system stable. We cannot have a... So we absolutely respect the input. We absolutely respect the process, and we'll continue to work with each of our states to identify the path they would like to chart. And we work hard to ensure there's good balanced outcomes because we recognize the challenges they're associated with other folks' desires. So I think you'll continue to see our utilities implement policy consistent with the needs of their stakeholders, their customers, and at the same time always respecting what's required by any of the federal standards. So thank you for your comments.
Okay, 31. Let's see. Becky.
This question comes from Billy DeRoss. He writes, Mr. Buffett, as a nurse from New York State, I've spent years struggling to secure good health insurance for myself, even while working on the front lines to save lives. In New York, accessing insurance means navigating a confusing state-run system that feels like it's designed to overwhelm. I'm curious, what ultimately led to the end of your healthcare venture with JP Morgan and Amazon? And given your commitment to value and long-term thinking, would you ever consider taking another look at health insurance reform in the U.S.?
Yeah, we're spending close. It's hard to get the precise figure, but close to 20% of GDP on health. And if you go back to 1960, there were a number of countries that were each spending around 5%. And then the lines began to diverge dramatically with the mathematical fact that there are only 100 percentage points in the equation didn't change. So we tried that experiment with JP Morgan and Amazon, and we had 3 people that didn't think they knew the answer, and but thought that, in my case, I used the term that it was a tapeworm in the economy, and we also found out that the tapeworm was alive in every part of the country. I mean, the hospitals liked it. The hospitals had prominent people who worked with people People generally liked their doctor, didn't like the system. I mean, all kinds of things. But in the end, J.P. Morgan and Amazon and Berkshire were not going to have any effect on changing that 20%. Now, that 20%, there are only 100 percentage points available, and when other countries spend 6 or 7% and perhaps use our system to their advantage, which is also very true. That is an enormous percentage of an economy, and we simply, it was too entrenched to really do much in the way of change. And we spent some money on it, and we did some work, and we learned a good bit about our own systems. And we saw the degree to which the present system was ingrained in so many people's, whether the healthcare providers or whether everybody, and these aren't evil people. I mean, they're just going about something and trying to save lives. But we found that whether it was in Canada or France or Britain or wherever it might be, that if you looked at our costs, that they were just far higher, and to some extent we were subsidizing the rest of the world, and people would come to the United States to do the really unusual or challenging aspects of health in terms of operations and that sort of thing. But we made no progress. And there comes a point where, well, the government's, it's so involved in the situation, and health is so important to everybody. And as I said to Jamie and Jeff, I said, well, the tapeworm won. And there are problems of society when you get 20% of your GDP going into a given industry. The degree of enthusiasm for changing that industry, the political power that the industry will have, and that doesn't mean they're evil. It's everybody, they just end up there, and so I don't know we came to the conclusion we didn't know the answer, three of us, and we had the money to do it, and we didn't know how to change how 330 million people felt about their doctor, felt about their health care, what they felt entitled to, it won't change by itself. And government is the only one that can change it. And the only people in government that can change it are getting majority of 435 people and 100 people. And my dad lost one election in his life in 1948. And he was a very strong Republican. And in 1950, he went back and beat the guy that beat him in 1948, and he got the doctors behind him. And he did they're very well, and they believe 100% in what they're doing. They're helping people every day. And during the pandemic, the sacrifices made by people save other people, just incredible. Can you imagine working in something where they're bringing in people that are, going to die by the dozens and dozens and dozens, and you try to somehow keep your own morale up and keep working with them. So you can't argue about the importance of it, but our costs are so different than any country in the world that it's a huge element. And we're a very rich country, so we can do things other countries can't do. And through our elected representatives and a whole variety of things over time, we've developed a system that is enormously resistant to any kind of major change, and it's important in every community that it's in. So I wish we had an answer for you, but I was somewhat pessimistic going in, and I was a little more pessimistic when we came out. But I'm glad we did what we did, and we learned something about our own failings in the process. So Berkshire, in effect, got its money's worth, but we didn't kill the tapeworm. Okay. Trying to change things in government it's an interesting proposition in the country because